So I'm Isaac Vega. I run Rose Gauntlet Entertainment along with my co-owner Lindsay Rode. I've been a game designer for the last 12 years and decided to open my own studio back in 2020.
Ashes is one of my favorite card games.
Aw, thank you.
So, what was it like transitioning from like working with like Flat Hat to having your very own card game?
Well, there's a lot of stuff that was happening behind the scenes that I didn't have to deal with. So I didn't have to deal with accounting. I didn't have to deal with running the business. I didn't have to deal with setting all that government stuff that you need to do, all the legal stuff. So that stuff has been a fun learning process, but it's been interesting and definitely what I wanted to do. I wanted to challenge myself to have something else going on, so that's been interesting. I would also say just managing everybody's expectations, trying to make sure that the team is doing well, making sure that I'm doing good communication across the board. I did some of that in my last job, but it wasn't necessarily my responsibility to be over everybody and be the final decision maker. So that also has some added layers of complications to it as well. I think it's whatever works best for them at their time. Any way that you can kind of get into the industry, whether or not it's self-publishing, if you have the means and the time to be able to do so, that's great. There's going to be a lot of other things you're learning along the way if you're doing that. But if you're also designing for another company, is it also a really great way to try out the industry as well? There's less risk involved, but sometimes it's harder to get that position because they're looking for people with experience, right? So that's why a lot of people do end up going the self-publishing route because they don't necessarily need someone else to approve that they're good enough to be in the industry, right? There's also volunteering. There's lots of ways to kind of get into the industry by just, being able to volunteer for a company, being able to just kind of like chat with companies at different events, such like at the one we're at. There's other ways of kind of dabbing your feet in there before you necessarily go and get a career.
Many times.
Right. One of the things I definitely recommend is looking to see what companies are either A, looking for playtesters, looking for volunteers for conventions, have events that they're specifically doing speed dating, things like that. There are also quite a bit of conventions that are also available for new designers, for people that are looking to just share their indie projects with other people. Getting your stuff in front of someone else, even if they're not a professional or they are a professional in the industry, is going to make you a better designer, is going to make you a better person that's going to be able to bring something into the industry because you're understanding how to work with an audience. So learning how to do that prior to getting involved in the industry is really good because you're going to learn how to take feedback. You're going to be able to learn how to also just see if what you decided to put in front of someone is actually translating into the emotion that you wanted to create at the table. So being able to do that on your own is something that you're going to have to do as a designer no matter what if you're working with someone else. So having those kinds of experiences before you are necessarily approaching a company is a good way to have that good understanding. But there's lots of different avenues to try to jump into the industry. Just see what's available to you. But conventions are also great. Like, I highly suggest going to a convention if you have the ability to. So that's the big question. It's not necessarily a perfect science. Playtesting can go on forever if you want it to. But the best way that I've always seen is if the intention behind your game is working without your involvement. So as a designer, you have to write rule books, and people are primarily going to be learning from those rule books. So making sure if you're not in the room and people are still having the experience that you designed, that you wanted to create, then you're knowing that you're on the right path. Like you're feel like if you're having that consistent experience across the board, I think it's probably ready to publish because you know that like everybody's having fun, everybody understood what I intended, and I'm not in the room trying to direct and change it. So I think that's probably the best you can hope for. The biggest piece of advice, and this was one of the hardest things that I had to learn coming out, when you're first starting out, you're very inspired, you have lots of ideas, you want to keep creating. But you need to learn how to finish. And that is really the biggest part that kind of separates people that have ideas versus how to become a successful designer. Finish your ideas, take constructive criticism, get it from that point A to point B to point C to point E. You want to be able to go through that entire process because if you're just stuck in the part where I have a new idea, boom, that can happen forever. And then you never actually get to that final point where it is a refined product where it gets to be in front of people, where it gets to be that finished thing. So try to learn how to finish something, and even if it's not perfect, then moving on to the next thing before just deciding to jump to new idea. You want to make sure you go through that entire process of playtesting, getting it refined, getting it to that point where you actually got the emotion that you were hoping to get at the table.